This video lesson is about proving triangle congruence. But before we proceed, let us recall. This time, the postulate or theorem will be given, and then we will identify the missing information or the missing side or angle and the congruent triangles. Let's have the first one. We will use SAS postulate to prove that these two triangles are congruent. So we need to have side, an included angle, and another side. So what is the missing information to have SAS postulate? We can say that AC is congruent to DF, and the congruent triangles are triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Second one, we will use ASA postulate to prove that these two triangles are congruent. So we already have the angle, the side, so we need to have another angle. The side should be the included side. So we will have these two angles, which are angle HMT is congruent to angle ATM. And the congruent triangles are triangle MHT is congruent to triangle TAM. Third one, we will use the SSS postulate to prove that these two triangles are congruent. So looking at the figure, we can say that this side is congruent to itself by reflexive property. So we have WR is congruent to WR. And then the congruent triangles are triangle RDY is congruent to triangle WOR. And then the last one, we will use the AAS theorem to prove that these two triangles are congruent. Looking at the figure, we already have one angle and non-included side, so we need to find the another angle. The another congruent angle are this one, and then they are angle R is congruent to angle E. And then the congruent triangles are triangle BER is congruent to triangle ARE. We will use two-column proof to prove that the two triangles are congruent. When we say two-column proof, it is a proof table which consists of two columns. So these are the parts of the two-column proof. First, we always have the given. This is the given statement or statements regarding the two triangles, and then we also have the illustration, which is the visual representation of the triangles. Afterwards, we need to have the proof. This one is the statement that you need to prove. We'll have the proof and then two columns. The first column is all about the statements. It is your statement to prove that the two triangles are congruent, and then you need to cite your reasons on the second column. Let's have example number 1. Our given is AE is congruent to CD and AC and DE bisects each other. So I want you to recall the meaning of bisector. And then we have the illustration. Here in the illustration, we already have the markings for the congruent given. We have AE is congruent to CD. And then we need to prove that triangle ABE is congruent to triangle CBD. So we will have our proof, and then we will have the two-column proof. It is in the supply the missing term or supply the missing statements and reasons. So first, you need to remember that the first statement is always your given. So you look at your given, it is your first given. So our first given is AE is congruent to CD. And then your reason is simply the word given. I will repeat, if your first statement is blank, you will just supply the given. And then if the reason is blank, you just need to write the word given. And then next, we have the statement number 2, AC and DE bisects each other. The reason will be is the word given, because it is included in our given part. Next statement, we have AB is congruent to CB. So this side AB is congruent to CB. Our reason will be definition of segment bisector. And then for the fourth statement, we have another side which bisect by side AC, that is DE. So what are the two congruent segments for side DE? We have EB is congruent to DB. So these are the congruent sides. And then our reason is also definition of segment bisector. Remember, the last statement is always your statement in the proof. I repeat, the last statement is always the statement in your proof. For the reason, you cannot use the word prove. Remember, you cannot use the word prove, so you need to look at your illustration, what postulate is being used to prove that triangle ABE is congruent to triangle CBD. So we have SSS postulate. Example number 2. Our given are CJ is congruent to DJ and J is the midpoint of SM. And here is the illustration. We need to prove that triangle CJS is congruent to triangle DJM. Here is the two-column proof, but we still have another set of statements and reasons in the next slide. Let's have the first one. The first statement states that CJ is congruent to DJ, and it is already marked in our illustration. Our reason will be the word given. And then for the second reason, we have given. So what is the second given in this example? J is the midpoint of SM. For the third statement, it is stated that SJ is equals to MJ. So what term did we apply to get SJ is equals to MJ? And that is definition of midpoint. Midpoint means it is at the center of the segment. So J is at the center, meaning SJ is equals to MJ. For the fourth reason, we have definition of congruent segments. If SJ is equal to MJ, we can also say that SJ is congruent to MJ. And then for the fifth statement, we have angle CJS and angle DJM are vertical angles. The reason will be definition of vertical angles. Let's have the sixth reason. The sixth reason is vertical angles theorem. What is vertical angles theorem? It means that vertical angles are congruent. What are the vertical angles we have? We have angle CJS is congruent to angle DJM. And then for the last statement, we have the proof triangle CJS is congruent to triangle DJM. For what reason? And that is SAS postulate. Let's have the third example. Our given are OE bisects angle HOP and OE is perpendicular to HP. Here is the illustration, and we need to prove that triangle HOE is congruent to triangle POE. We have the two-column proof. This is the first set, and we still have another set in the next slide. For the first statement and first reason, it is blank, but the first statement is always the first given. So you look at the given. What is our first given? We have OE bisects angle HOP, and then the reason will be the word given. For the second reason, we have definition of angle bisector. In statement number 1, it states that OE bisects angle HOP. So it creates two congruent angles. And what are the two congruent angles? We have angle HOE is congruent to angle POE. For the third reason, we have the word given. So what is our second given here? It is OE perpendicular to HP. What do we mean by perpendicular segments, which is in the fourth reason? When we say perpendicular, the segments intersect at right angle. So what are the two right angles created here? We have angle HEO and angle PEO. So these are the two right angles. For the fifth reason, we have all right angles are congruent. What are the two congruent angles? We have angle HEO and angle PEO because they are both right angles. For the sixth statement, we have OE is congruent to OE. For what reason? It is reflexive property. For the seventh statement, which is the last statement, we will use triangle HOE is congruent to triangle POE, which is our proof. And then we cannot write proof in the reason. We need to think of postulate or theorem that can prove that these two triangles are congruent. Looking at the figure, we can say that they are congruent using ASA postulate. Example, our given are AC is perpendicular to CS, ES is perpendicular to CS, and then we have angle A is congruent to angle E. This is the illustration, and then we have to prove that triangle CAS is congruent to triangle SEC. This is the two-column proof. We will supply the missing terms. We have the first statement, AC is perpendicular to CS. What will be the reason? The reason is given. For the second reason, definition of perpendicular segment. What do we mean by perpendicular segment? From the word perpendicular, if AC is perpendicular to CS, what is the right angle that it creates? We have angle ACS, which is the right angle. And then for the third reason, we have another given. It will be our second given. It is ES perpendicular to CS. And then same as the statement and reason for number 2, we have angle ESC is a right angle. And then the reason will be definition of perpendicular segment. For the fifth one, this is not the last statement. We still have another 3 statements to be followed. So our reason will be all right angles are congruent. Kindly look at the statements. What are the 2 right angles we have? We have angle ACS is congruent to angle ECS. And then for the next one, we have number 6 given. So this is our last given. It is angle A is congruent to angle E. And then for the 7th statement, we have CS is congruent to S. So even though the letters are interchanged, we can use the reflexive property. And then for the last statement, we will have the statement in the proof part. We have triangle CAS is congruent to triangle SEC. And then our reason will be, we already have the angle, and non-included side. So that is AAS theorem. So that's how we prove triangles using two-column proof.